Either, any, what would you like me to use?
Right.
I will use
Priscilla
any.
like Steve.
Thank you so much.
So
Oh,
it's-
wonderful.
She used it. I just got this.
Very nice. I appreciate this. Okay. So we have, ooh, yes, look at that. So nice. Inked all up. Wonderful. Aristotle is our first option, right? Do you remember that? Remember what he said?
Yeah, you have to pity the...
Yeah. Good. Through what he called catharsis, which was the rousing and purging of pity and fear. Now, pity, feel sorry for the hero because we understand that in some way we may be guilty of the same sorts of flaws, the same sorts of attitudes that he is guilty of, and fear, therefore, because it could happen, therefore, to us, right? So you rouse and purge those. What was the next one? I think I said it was Hegel.
Is that where none of them like have a happy ending?
Right. All roads lead to wrong. It's the classic lose-lose scenario. You can't get out of this place alive, right? That was Hegel. He said no matter what you do, you're going to end up in trouble because you're in a tragic formula of sorts. That's an exterior analysis. It's the situation you find yourself in, right? Nietzsche, what did he say?
It's one of the things he said.
But
One of them.
now
But he said that Apollo and Dionysius are a figurative way of describing the struggle in our bodies and in our souls between right reason and goodness versus madness, frenzy, and impulse to carnal activity, right? Dionysius. The Bacchanal. Okay. Which one of these do you think works best for you in Lear? Let's take them in sequence. I think I've already made a pretty good argument for the pity and fear. You know, Lear makes a lot of big mistakes, and he's given a temper, but then again, who hasn't had a temper tantrum at some time? Or, if you haven't had one lately, well, life is young. You may have your opportunities. All I can say is, oh yeah, I've thrown my temper tantrums and said and done stupid things. Don't go ask my wife, right? So, yeah, I look at Lear and, well, yeah, I see a reflection of me. I don't have a problem with that. So certainly the pity and fear is there. I feel for Lear, brother. You know, we're there, and it has a lot of meaning for me. What about Hegel then? Can Lear get out of this situation? Does he have a path that is going to be easy? Depends on how you analyze the opening of the play, I think. It's one of the reasons why I gave it emphasis. If you think that he truly is losing his mind, and therefore really kind of senses that he needs to hand it over to other people, maybe we can say that he had no way out of this. I think it's still a bad plan to divide up a kingdom into thirds rather than give it to one person and keep it unified and all that. I would still argue, and I know for a fact Shakespeare's audience would have looked at that division of the lands and gone, bad plan. Ooh, bad plan. Don't like that. Not a good idea. Don't do that. So, lose-lose. Anybody want to argue for Hegel being pertinent here?
I mean, if you give it to Goneril, there's a chance you wouldn't win the struggle for it, but she's still kind of a snake, so...
Would it have been a good thing to turn the reins of the country over to Goneril? I mean, what we find out about her character later on in the play is bad, right? Yeah.
Were there any, like, I'm asking because I don't personally remember, but were there any traits that Goneril displayed that were any type of okay?
Sure. Oh, sure. I see her as having quite a lot in common with Dad, and Dad is a man of many accomplishments. Passionate intensity, folks. It makes people hard to deal with sometimes, but they get things done. And it's precisely because of that passionate intensity. Okay? Now, you
So when
see,
it came to Edmund and that, all of her traits, whether they were good or bad, turned bad because she wanted something.
well, okay. You know, and I think you're onto something there, because I would say it's not so much the character traits that in themselves can be good or bad as what you direct them towards. That would be a way of looking at it. And I would say, if she had turned that intensity towards something more productive, my sense of the play is that that is what Lear succeeded with. He was turning his intensity toward amassing and building a kingdom. So when he was a younger man, his faults could be overlooked because of the successes that he accomplished. On the other hand, once he starts losing his mind, oh boy, that intensity goes bad, 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 right? In the way that it worked for him earlier, it works against him hard. Right? What about Nisha? Let's move on to that. What do you see? I see a couple of different people, I think, in the play who actually are struggling between Apollo and Dionysius. They know, I think most of the people in this play have some sort of a conscience. That's one of the reasons why they're having soliloquies and talking about why and what their motives are. But on the other hand, they keep surrendering to Dionysius. That's the issue. They say, oh, I can't get around this, and so I'm going to go ahead and get my brother in trouble. I'm going to go ahead and take my 100 knights and run. And that, you see that impulsive quality of themselves. I want it, and I want it now kind of attitude in Dionysius, and I see that being especially powerful. So, what am I saying? This is one of the reasons why it's good to have more than one way of talking about tragedy. If you don't especially feel a great deal of pity and fear in this play, well, maybe Nisha is a better solution for you in order to understand the tragedy. On the other hand, let's back up. Let's back up. Julius Caesar. Pity and fear in Caesar? Does that work for you?
Maybe for Brutus, yeah.
For Brutus? Yeah, I can see that. Lose-lose?
Yeah.
For Brutus?
For like most people, yeah.
Yeah.
Like Caesar and then
Caesar too. Yeah. If the formula seems to hold there, that's very nice. And then the internal struggle between doing what seems right and doing what seems impulsive, giving in to our baser selves. Definitely. Okay. You see what I'm trying to say. They're just different ways of thinking about the same sort of plot line. And sometimes it affords you a better perspective on what's going on. Whereas one or more of these definitions may not work for you so well in one, it may apply better or more effectively to the other. That too is the sort of question that I could be cooking up for a final exam. Just want you to be thinking about that. You know this little scribble I got here on the board, you need to have that ingrained in your brain, right? When you come in for that final exam, absolutely you're going to have that. Locked down tight. Full awareness, and ready to apply it to either of those two plays. We'll talk about it in some detail. What ways did you feel pity? What ways do you see, for example, Lear controlled by Apollo versus Dionysius? Is there any Apollo here? So those kinds of questions. Yes, Yvonne?
Is Apollo and Dionysius strictly internal conflict?
Yes, and that's a good point for us to emphasize here. This really is an internal.
That happened a lot with Brutus.
And this one is an external struggle. In other words, this is the situation. You're stuck in a situation where you just don't seem to have a good answer left. Whereas this one it's an interior dynamic. I don't know how to get out of this because I'm torn in two directions. Questions about that? Anything at all? We're making good time. Good. All right. I want to talk a little bit about how do you get out of that Act 1, Scene 1 problem in Lear. You think you can? You think there's a way to? You don't think so, do you, Sarah? I'm not sure that I can. I can give you an approach that is probably as good as anything to try and get into. Go ahead.
You should have raised his children better.
You should have raised his children better. Well, if we could turn back the clock, we could solve that problem, couldn't we? If we could turn back the clock, we could say, Lear, don't get old and irrational.
I'm just saying, like, he kind of
You might not listen to you.
You might not listen. You just rage.
Kick you out.
Okay, but you understand the problem. What do you do when you've got a Lear-type personality and you need to deal with that person? Yeah, this is a nuisance. This is a real snag. I heavens help us if any of us actually run into Lear or turn into Lear. I don't think that'll happen. But if you take an extreme case and test the theory, maybe that's a good place to test. So what I want to talk about now is about how do you deal with these people? How do you negotiate, right? If the person has decided to do something that you see as being totally destructive, it's a bad plan, but they are impulsively running into it, and you want to say, wait, don't, hit the brakes, right? Okay, here are some ideas that might help with that. When you're trying to deal with people, especially as a leader, the chances are that you are going to wind up in a situation in your life where you're not actually just going to be negotiating on behalf of yourself, which we do on a daily basis, right? You may be negotiating on behalf of other people, maybe even a division within your company, maybe as a representative of your company. And so having some skill and some practice in negotiation, therefore, becomes very valuable. And it's interesting to me that Americans tend not to be very good negotiators generally. I see Yvonne, you agree with me. You want to explain why you agree?
Well, we talked a lot in cultural anthropology about how our culture is very individualistic, which we don't really see unless you really step out of the box and look at the rest of the world.
Right.
So we tend to be very, I'm right, everything I'm doing is right, I should be in charge of whatever. So it's hard to let that go. And it's hard for us to see that we're even doing it.
And we don't see ourselves as being part of a larger social context very effectively.